Good morning and welcome to all. Let me welcome officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the officials from the Ministry of Education, the Youth Training and Employment Partnership Program, YTEPP, and of course, members of the media and members of the public. My name is Wade Mark, and I'm the chairman of the PAEC. May I advise the following? This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to continue the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Youth Training and Employment Partnership Program, YTEPP Limited, for the period 2008 to 2014. The committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the YTEPP in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to help, may I repeat, to help the YTEPP improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. At this time, I would like to ask officials of the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division to introduce themselves, followed by Ministry of Education and the YTEPP team in that order. Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, everyone. I am Chintamani Suku from the Investments Division.
Good morning, everyone. Annabella Tha, also from the Investment Division.
Good morning. Nisa German, Central Audit Investments Division.
Good morning. Kurt Meyer, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
Good morning. My name is Carol Bikram. I'm Acting Director, Research Planning and Technical Services, Ministry of Education.
Good morning. Dr. Tapsy-Jahoor, Acting Director, Finance and Accounts, Ministry of Education.
Good morning. Avril Rahim, Director, Legal Services, Ministry of Education.
Sora Bass, Chairman of the Board, YTEPP.
Good morning, Jesse Morse, Deputy Chairman.
Good morning, Nigel Forgini, Chief Executive Officer.
Good morning, Jerome Grant, Director of Finance and IT.
Good morning, everyone. Caroline Glodor, Director of Youth Training.
Good morning, Donna Schoon-Moses, the Director of Retraining.
Good morning, Christo Kiev, Director of Entrepreneurial Development and Support Services.
Good morning, Eric Taylor, Board Member.
Good morning, Caroline Gopal, Board Member.
Good morning, Leonard Nimblat, Manager, Internal Audit.
Pleasant good morning, everyone. Arthur Billy Jackman, Manager, Research.
Morning, all. I am Nicole Thompson, Finance Manager at YTEPP.
ask members of our committee to introduce themselves, and I'll start with my colleague on my immediate right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Small. I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning. Foster Cummings, committee member.
And then I'll ask my colleagues on this side.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again, Jennifer Wittes-Primers, member of this committee.
Good morning, Fitzgerald Hines, member.
Thank you so very much, members. At this time, I'll invite the chairman of the YTEPP to make brief opening remarks. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that on the last occasion, when I made my opening remarks, I stated that the performance of YTEPP could only improve after these hearings. I am pleased to say that since then, we have started to work to strengthen all the weaknesses identified, and I hope that all our written answers have met with your satisfaction. And if you will allow me, I'd pass on to my CEO, if that's all right with you.
All right. Well, before you pass on to your CEO, I'd like to invite the Permanent Secretary Acting to make a few opening remarks.
Madam Chair, members, on behalf of the Ministry of Education, thank you for this opportunity to answer questions. After the last session, we have reviewed some of our internal processes, and the Ministry of Education has embarked upon a process to review exactly how we look at the governance of not only YTEPP, but all the other agencies under our charge. Thank you.
We'll ask the CEO to participate during the exchanges that we're going to have in a short while. So thank you at this time. May I once again welcome everyone to this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. And I would like to begin by recognizing the fact that the matters that we raised at the last meeting and which required written responses, we did receive those written responses, and I want to compliment the team for responding in the way that they have to the requests of our committee. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to the CEO as well. I would like to begin by asking the CEO, when we last met, you did bring to our attention, or it was brought to our attention, that a number of persons in the employed of YTEPP were in receipt of several loans. We didn't know medical was part of it until you submitted your written response. So we have medical loans, we have study loans, I understand, and there's a third category, salary, where they get advances. Could you tell us, since we last met, what action has been taken to address this breach of the manual that governs state enterprises? Mr. CEO, can you brief this committee?
With regard to morning again, everyone. With regard to the situation involving loans to employees, the organization reviewed its processes as well as reviewed the number of loans that were outstanding to ascertain whether or not there were any loans that were not being paid, and if there were, to make recommendations for change. In terms of the performance monitoring manual, the performance monitoring manual provides information and guidance with regard to government policy. And YTEPP is always guided by government's policy, especially circulars coming out from the Ministry of Finance. However, in areas where the policy is silent, YTEPP utilizes its memorandum and articles of association, which was provided to it by Corporation Seoul and has outlined 10 areas under Section 94, which has asked the organization to seek permission for, and those include areas of investment in projects over $1 million, creating any debt in excess of $1 million, any long-term debt more than 3 years, dissolution or sale of or transfer or mortgage, merger or consolidation, capital assets, approval for capital operation budgets, establishment of reserves and amounts, and negotiating any foreign loans. Outside of that, the company's memorandum and articles provides for the ability for the company to provide loans in certain circumstances. The company has an education policy as well as policies that govern loans, and those policies came forward from between the period of 1990 and 1988, when the organization was governed by the World Bank.
So you are advising this committee, in the absence of any clearly outlined rules under the state manual on enterprises or enterprises, the state enterprises performance manual. You're saying where those things are absent, you're going to revert and refer to your memorandum and articles of incorporation.
Yes, sir.
That is what you're advising us?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, we are advising you that you can't do that. Where things are silent, you seek your line minister approval. You submit a document seeking approval of the line ministry for whatever measures you would like to effect in addressing those issues that you would like to deal with. Remember, YTEPP receives allocations from the Parliament on a yearly basis, and those allocations are released through the Ministry of Education at this time, because it was another ministry in the period 2008-2014. So my advice to you is that that practice that you have executed, you need to revisit. And we will so recommend to the Parliament and to you when we are submitting our findings and recommendations. I also would want to ask as well, you did provide to us the last period we met, the terms and conditions. Transport allowance was one of them, and cellular phone allowance. We received correspondence from you indicating that the CPO had in fact approved a number of positions along with certain terms and conditions. We didn't have sight, however, of the letter that was issued by the CPO to that effect. Do you have a copy of that letter? And if you do, can you circulate that to this committee?
What we do have, Chairman, is a copy from the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training, which accompanied the document which we sent.
No. Yeah, I think I spoke very clearly. And I said that if the CPO has approved terms and conditions for certain categories which you have attached to a letter by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Science, Technology, and Tertiary Education. I want to indicate to you the final sentence in that letter dated the 10th of January 2013, says, and I read, "Finally, you are reminded that the prior approval of the ministerial committee responsible for monitoring remuneration arrangements in the public sector is to be sought and obtained before instituting new compensation arrangements." Could you advise this committee if you sought and whether you obtained the approval of the ministerial committee on this matter?
I cannot recall if we wrote directly following that letter from the ministry.
So you have a letter, Mr. CEO, dated the 10th of January, and it is, as the former Prime Minister used to say, pellucidly clear in the final paragraph and final sentence before you, as CEO, can embark on instituting new remuneration arrangements. You must, I emphasize, must obtain the approval of the ministerial committee of which the CPO is secretariat to before you can move forward. And you have to obtain that approval. And you're saying that you can't recall. It is either you did or you did not, because you were there for 12 years. So could you advise this committee whether you actually sought or you did not seek the approval of the ministerial committee?
The organization would have submitted documentation through the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training to be sent to the Chief Personnel Officer. The organization never had direct relations with the CPO's office, but always worked through the line ministry with regards to matters of compensation.
Yeah, I recognize the Mrs. Baptiste Primus, and then Mr. Hines, and I'll come back.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Chairman, it is normal, Mr. CEO, in reference to the statement that you just made to this committee, you have advised that you did not receive, along with this letter that came from the then Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training, dated January the 10th, 2013, on behalf of the Permanent Secretary, titled Revised Remuneration Arrangements to be applicable to monthly paid positions at Youth Training and Employment Partnership Program. You're saying that with this document, you did not receive a copy of the letter that the CPO would have sent to the then ministry?
That is correct, ma'am.
So if that is so, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would like to ask Mr. Kurt Myers, who is the acting permanent secretary, would the ministry be in a position to produce a copy of the CPO's authorization for these terms and conditions?
We will check the files and see if we have a copy of that document.
So, Mr. Chairman, through you again, I would like to ask the Permanent Secretary to provide this committee with a copy of the authorization from the Chief Personnel Officer. Is it normal when these revised remunerations are being sent out that a copy of the CPO letter is also attached? Similarly, if positions have been sent to PMCD, once PMCD approves certain positions, they will instruct the ministry that when the document is being sent to cabinet, that their document must be attached. And there's a reason for doing that, that it is proof of the authenticity of the information being placed before cabinet, so that we will await the certification from the ministry that these are valid directions or approval from the Chief Personnel Officer.
Yeah, and Mr. Myers, may I ask, having regard to the 2008 to 20 14 financial statements. And having regard to what you have just heard from Mr. Forgini, CEO, you cannot recall, or would you be able to recall at this time, whether the Ministry of Education would have any recollection of this matter?
At that time, YTEPP would have fallen under science and technology. We will, as I said, we will have to peruse our files and see the documents. The documents should be there. When the realignment was done, we should have gotten the documents, so we will have to check the file.
Or revert to the Chief Personnel Officer herself.
That would probably be the simplest task, but we should get the documents once it exists.
Yeah, I recognize Mr. Hines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My issue is a little more fundamental and to some extent procedural. Mr. Forgini, this letter, to which reference was made a moment ago, was submitted by you in answer to our request for further information for today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You would have overseen the presentation or the contents of the documents coming to us. Am I correct?
That is correct.
I presume you would have read the letters in that package. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And you would have seen the paragraph to which the chairman just made reference. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did it not occur to you that you should come here with some proof that that last paragraph was satisfied for this morning? Did it?
Again, Mr. Hines, we never received correspondence from the Chief Personnel Officer.
Mr. Forgini,
we
just hold
always
on,
receive
please.
correspondence from
Mr. Forgini, you said so a while ago,
yes,
and that's clear to me. I don't need any further persuasion on that. The question I just asked you was, having read this for submission to us for this morning, did it not occur to you that you should have also have attached to this any proof that the ministerial committee's approval was sought? Did that occur to you? That's the question.
No, sir, it did not.
It did not?
No.
And further, you did not answer the chairman's question. He asked a very, very, very simple question, which I am now forced to repeat. The question is, and remains, did you, Mr. Forgini, write seeking the approval of the ministerial committee? Your answer was about the organization. That wasn't the question. So my question to you now is, in repeat, did you write seeking the approval of the ministerial committee?
No, I didn't write.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me and giving me the opportunity. Good morning to everyone again. Mr. Chairman, I am almost hesitant to get involved in what I sense. My read is that there's a complete breakdown of good order and proper governance at this institution. That is my assessment. I have a couple of simple questions I want to ask the CEO. Mr. Forgini, are you aware of the phrase called tone at the top? I see you have a master, so I just want to make sure you're on a tone at the top.
I have never heard the term, but I can, guess
well, let me
what
help
it
you.
means.
Tone at the top generally is a term, a management lexicon that suggests that the persons at the top of the organization, the tone they set, tends to be driven through the rest of the company. So that if the people at the top of the organization are doing good things, in general, they're mirroring the kind of things that the organization wishes to see, and those things flow. And the reverse also applies. Let me ask another straight question, Mr. Forgini. Would you agree that if an employee of any company is found abusing the company resources, that stern disciplinary action or even termination could be warranted?
Yes.
Would you also agree that in terms of if someone at the head of an organization is setting a positive tone, that subordinate staff may likely to follow that tone? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Good. I just wanted to make sure I'm laying the groundwork for my presentation, Chairman, because I've had a couple of weeks in between the sessions to really dive deep. I have a couple of questions for the Permanent Secretary, the Acting Permanent Secretary, Mr. Meyer. Mr. Meyer, what is your understanding of the policy regarding state enterprises and having official vehicles regarding the identification of those vehicles with a signage on the outside of the vehicle? Is there any requirement of the state enterprise?
My understanding is all government vehicles are supposed to be marked.
Good. And that has been communicated to YTEPP.
Yes.
I believe the circular memorandum from Ministry of Finance would have been to all permanent secretaries and state enterprises, but I would have to confirm that.
Okay. Well, I just want clarity, because I want, before I ask questions, I want to seek clarity. So I go back to the CEO. Could you advise this committee whether all of YTEPP's official vehicles are properly marked as YTEPP vehicles?
All except one.
Which is?
Which is the one assigned to the Office of the Chief Executive Officer.
I don't understand the exception. You have to explain to the committee. If our understanding of the rule is that every vehicle, official vehicle, has to have the signage of the company. So you are saying that all except one, the one assigned to you.
Yes.
Why is that so?
The vehicle assigned to me is part of our compensation package, where the company provides a fully maintained vehicle up to the value of $400,000 plus.
Mr. Forgini, you're confusing me. Who is the owner of the vehicle?
The owner of the vehicle is YTEPP.
Good. That's all we need to know. So that you're saying to this committee that you know the owner of the vehicle is YTEPP. It may be assigned to you, but according to the Permanent Secretary and this committee, we are aware that every vehicle owned by the entity should be properly marked as a YTEPP vehicle.
Okay.
So that you, and who took the decision to have that exception?
I would have.
And who did you confirm that? Did you indicate such to the Permanent Secretary or through your board?
No.
A unilateral decision of the CEO?
Pardon, could you repeat?
I can assume that it's a unilateral decision of the CEO?
Yes.
Good. Mr. Permanent Secretary, this is why I'm talking about tone at the top. Mr. Permanent Secretary, what is your understanding of how when we are in a place as an entity and you have persons in charge of resources, what is your understanding of the need for overseas travel by officers of YTEPP?
Overseas travel?
I would like your understanding, or anybody from your team, of the need for overseas travel by staff at YTEPP. The Permanent Secretary.
Definitely would be board approval, and it would have to, in most cases, I would get cabinet approval for that, especially given the stringent financial times we're under.
Because I have looked in the account submitted, and I have seen a line item that reflects some overseas travel every year, averaging $800,000 a year over the 5-year period for which you provided data. So I am not sure. That's why I'm addressing you, the Permanent Secretary, because I am assuming that $800,000 a year in overseas travel by YTEPP, there must be some correspondence or letting the PS know, keeping them in the loop, or at least at the end of the year, PS, these are the things, this is part of the work plan, and to achieve the work plan, we need to attend these meetings or whatever. So I would at least assume that the ministry is aware.
If it's a budgeted line item, it may not necessarily be that travel would have taken place. It would probably just be put into the estimates for budgeting purposes. But the approval process definitely would have to come to the ministry.
Because we have it as reported as spent over a period. So that this is why I'm asking. No. So let me go back now. Forgive me. I am going on a deliberate line here because I have a sense of what is going on in YTEPP, and there's a complete breakdown. There seems to be this unilateral approach. I am not enamored of it with public funds. There may be logical reasons, but often is not what we do, but how we do it. There's a process that should have been followed, and that's all we're saying here. We're not against anybody having proper reasons for things, but if you have a proper reason, you should go through the appropriate channel. So let me address the Permanent Secretary, the CEO again. Could you advise us on what is going on at YTEPP, or what has been going on at YTEPP in terms of overseas travel to Singapore, travel to Japan for various? Could you help us with what has been happening at YTEPP?
Certainly. First, I'd like to correct the statement of $800,000 per year in
average
overseas travel. That is totally inaccurate.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in every instance where... yes, sir.
Could you indicate what is the average?
Overseas travel in 2008 was $93,000. Nothing in 2009, nothing in 2010, 193 in 2011, 584 in 2013, 633 in 2014.
633,000?
Yes, in 2014. 200 in 2015, 53 in 2016.
Okay, continue.
So,
if I may,
please,
Chairman,
proceed.
In every instance where there was overseas travel, as stated in the State Enterprise Policy Manual, if a member of the board traveled, they sought permission from the minister with responsibility. And in every instance where a member of staff traveled, permission was sought from the board of directors in conformance to the State Enterprise Review Manual.
Well, Mr. Fortuny, I want to thank you for the fulsomeness of your response, because the line items that I found in your document here, it's lumped as entertainment, including overseas travel. So it's still a large number, and it covers a 5-year period in this document that you submitted to us. So we weren't sure exactly how much of that was entertainment and how much of that was overseas travel. The average was about $800,000 a year. So let me ask a question then. But these overseas travel for staff, for YTEPP, could you explain to the committee what would be, just broadly, the purpose of staff attending meetings overseas?
The travel overseas were for a variety of reasons. Mostly it was with regard to the company's increase, or the company's attempt to increase the level of its offering based on the mandate we received. Before 2010 or 2011, YTEPP provided mostly level 1 training, which is what we call pre-craft. The labor market required persons who had higher levels of skills. And so in response to what the labor market had required, the company took a decision to increase the levels at which certain courses are offered. To do that, it meant that we had to work with curriculum experts, both locally and abroad, as well as look at best practices for several of the areas that we wanted to look at. During that time, the organization felt, for example, that we wanted to increase access for persons with disabilities, and so we worked with Lovi out of Finland, because they had the best program for such. Coming out of that, we were able to develop our site bus, which is a bus for persons with disabilities, and to date we have done 1,901 persons coming out of that. We would have also traveled to Germany, and travel to Germany was to participate in World Skills, which is a skills Olympics competition. YTEPP as well as COSTAT had 2 representatives there. Our representative got a total of 453 points out of a possible 500 and received honorable mention. The work coming out of that program, for example, showed areas where YTEPP had shortcomings, in that in our cosmetology area, we were only catering for persons of a given hair type. But if it is that we are going to meet the needs of industry, especially in terms of tourism, we need to give persons a wider range of experience.
Mr. Fortune, I wanted to stop you and thank you for the expansive explanation and the expansive amount of travel that has been happening, including, I'm aware, in terms of the cosmetology bus, somebody had to go to Japan.
Yes.
Okay, we're just trying to understand And the use of the cosmetology bus, how is that working?
That is working fine. We have been able to do programs in Enterprise,
I'm sure the Permanent Secretary would have all the information from you in terms of all of these various things, because the committee just has a view that where Trinidad and Tobago is and now and where we're likely to be for the next period, a frugal mindset is required.
Understood.
A frugal mindset and approach is required. So that while these things may have happened in the past, we are hammering home the point about understanding, one, your state entity, two, we have a tight economic situation, and that some of the practices that we've seen are not practices that we'd like to see repeated going forward. Yeah? I see that Madam Chair is shaking her head in agreement, because Madam Chair understands exactly where this committee, we are trying to help. Mr. Chairman, if you permit me, one last question in this round. I have only a couple dozen questions, but I won't have enough time. Mr. Fortuny, would you be aware as to whether, be able to inform this committee, as to whether at any time during your tenure, any members of any relative of yours was employed at YTEPP?
I have no relatives employed at YTEPP.
At any time during your tenure?
No relatives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ford, before I go to the CEO, can we get some responses from the Investments Division as it concerns the oversight role of the Investments Division YTEPP, particularly in line of the question that was raised earlier, where there appears to have been a unilateral imposition of remuneration packages. But we await Mr. Meyer's documentation from the CPO. So I am asking the question, what kind of oversight responsibility does the Ministry of Finance Investments Division exercise in the context of matters like what I have identified? Could anyone guide us on that?
All right. Well, through you, Chair, the manual provides guidance on the policy, on government policy with respect to terms and conditions of employment for state enterprise, state entities. The policy states that government has established this committee, this ministerial committee, to approve terms and conditions of employment. The company will make representation through their line ministry, and the line ministry will then take their proposal to the CPO for approval. So the Investments Division is not involved directly in that process.
And in the instance of what we have been discussing, can you recall whether such was done?
Well, like I said, it will not come directly through the Investments Division. It is clearly between the company, the line ministry, and the office of the CPO.
All right. In the case of workers being given cellular phones, given traveling allowances, the policy of the manual does not permit that. And I'm just asking whether the Investments Division would have been aware of this particular development where some 82 workers were given cell phones and another 67 were given traveling allowances, which ran contrary to the state enterprises monitoring performance manual policy on these matters. So I just wanted to know if the Investment Division, even though you may not have direct sight on this matter, you must have been brought some information would have reached your desk on this matter.
To that, I will say that, again, the correspondence does not come to the Investments Division. The terms and conditions are considered by the Ministerial Committee, and they usually ask for very detailed information on the nature of the work, so that the companies should be able to justify what they are requesting for the employees?
Mr. Fortuné, the last time we met, we asked the question of you whether the company had a fraud policy or risk management policy. At the material time, you indicated yes. And you went on further to say the board had approved same. But you subsequently indicated in writing that you were inaccurate in that particular submission. I would like to ask you, being there for 12 years as the CEO, before you put pen to paper, or before you respond to questions that are put to you, you ought to be at least aware of what occurs in the company. But for you to make a categorical statement that this fraud policy exists and that it was approved by the board, and upon asking you to produce the evidence to support that submission, you now put in writing that you misled us and you were inaccurate. Now, would you not agree with me that that is a matter that you ought to be at least a little more careful in articulating when a committee like ours, put questions like that, like this to you? How would you respond to this?
I would say, yes, I should be a little more careful. When we submitted the first series of documents in terms of the questions for answer, we would have indicated that we do not have one. It is a document that I would have read, that I would have signed off on. On the day in question, in terms of the way in which the questions were coming, I was mistaken when I indicated that we had one. The policy that we have is still a draft policy that is before the board. It has not been signed off by the board.
No, so that's what I'm saying, that you're leaving and you're given the impression that you're not in charge of your portfolio. Because if you are in charge of your portfolio and you have been there for 12 years, you must be aware, or you ought to be aware, that there is no fraud policy and there's no risk management policy. But to tell this committee and to have this traveled around the world, that you do have a fraud policy and you do have a risk management, and it turns out not to be so. You're misleading this committee. And I think, it is something that we take very, very seriously as a committee. So I'm just advising you that that pattern of behavior, you have to be very careful when you come before a joint select committee. I want to ask an additional question. Do you have any internal security within YTEPP?
Yes, we have external security and internal security.
Could you identify the external and the internal?
When you say identify?
Well, you said you have internal security.
Yes, we have.
And external security. How is this manifested?
We have internal YTEPP security. We have about 10 or 12 officers who function at most of our locations and sites, and we also have external security.
Now, those 10 or 12 persons that are on site, they are paid by YTEPP?
They are paid by YTEPP.
And are they trained, and by whom?
Some of those officers would have received training over a period of time. The majority of officers have been there probably for as much as 15 or 20 years. We would have provided some updated training, but I cannot say in terms of the kinds of training they would have received originally when they entered the organization.
So you have 12 officers, 10 or 12 officers who are security officers, but the company has no policy as it relates to a continuous program of training to protect the assets of the organization. You don't have a policy for the security arm of your operation.
We provide training for them as we see necessary. Over the years, they would have received additional training, but I am not sure of the kind of training they would have received 10, 15, or 12 years ago.
What about the external security? And could you tell us what is the manifestation of that?
The external security came about as a result of a decision of the board in 2007 to reduce the complement of internal security. The board felt that YTEPP should not be in the business of providing security services, as we did not have the resources or the skilled know-how to do so. We didn't have a security manager at that point in time. The trend was to move persons who were in the security area into the organization. So persons were retooled, reskilled, and ended up as drivers or in the accounts or other departments. And the decision was taken to outsource security for the areas that we covered.
So you outsource security?
We outsource security.
Could you identify the security that you outsource, the name of the organization that would have been engaged?
Yes, the organization is Protec.
Could you, how long that organization has been engaged?
They would have been engaged over the last 7 or 8 years.
And could you tell us how many personnel were employed there?
I am not sure because the person,
No, listen, you are in charge of YTEPP as CEO. You have been there for 12 years. You cannot tell this committee that you are paying security through your funds that are allocated via the ministry, and you are not sure of these things. You are there 12 years now. You are coming before a committee which is a constitutional body. You ought to have information that can help us. So could you just tell us what this experience has been like? Protect security. How long has it been in existence under your watch at YTEPP? And how many officers are engaged in that operation that you are aware of?
The organization has been providing services to YTEPP for around 8 years. The services that they provide would be services to our head office, where we have 2 officers. We have 1 officer at the South Office, 2 officers at Waterloo. We have 1 officer that works in the night at the warehouse, another one that works in the night at Diego Martin. We have 2 officers, at Maloney. We have 2 officers that work at Diego Martin, and we have 2 officers in the night at Valencia.
So so we have parallel security operations. We have 10 to 12 security officers attached to YTEPP.
Yes.
But we don't know what they are doing. They seem to be ghost workers.
That is not accurate, sir.
Well, tell us, for instance, from what you have told us, it appears that there are over 20 security officers engaged under YTEPP on the one hand and Protect Security on the other. So we have 2 sets of officers. But the first set, about 10 or 12, they are just providing security for YTEPP during the course of the day.
Yes, mostly.
And then you have Protect Security that would provide security in the evening into the morning.
Yes, sir.
So in all, you would say how many you have on the employed or on your payroll?
On our payroll, we have the what we call YTEPP security. In terms of the outsource, that could change given the occasion. So for example, I'm just explaining. For example, if it is we have an additional event that requires more security, that could go up by an extra 2 or so. So on a monthly basis, depending on the needs of the organization, it will change. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, one of the things that the outsourced security also provides is what we call surveillance. We have a challenge at our centers with crime where our trainees are robbed in the evenings, sometimes after classes. Our classes on evenings go from 4:30 to 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And we provide security services, mobile security services, to ensure that our trainees after class are able to go home. In 2015, we experienced a situation where our one trainee was robbed and killed in Arima, and that is one of the reasons why we look for outsourced security to be able to treat with those circumstances.
Could you provide us, or can I put it another way? Protect security, as well as the YTEPP security, do they provide any personal security services to any members of staff, management?
No, they don't.
They don't provide?
No.
Okay. Could you indicate to us at this time, you have a company or section of your operation called the Facilities Department?
Yes.
Do you at any point in time recall, based on waste of scrap iron, you engage in that, right?
Yes, we sell scrap iron.
Right. And when they are not sold, what do you do with the excess?
Scrap iron is usually cleared through sale.
Right. And whenever you have excess, what do you do?
We never have excess. We sell it to scrap iron dealers.
Would you want to indicate whether, as CEO, you're aware of scrap iron being converted into gym equipment?
The monies from scrap iron sales would be sent to the accounts department for the accounts department to account for. There is a situation where the company bought a treadmill for staff as part of our health and wellness campaign, and the money that was used would have been from scrap iron sales. Mm-hmm. But it was called to account in the accounts department.
Can you provide us with information on your relationship between, on the relationship, I should say, between Sagicor and YTEPP?
Sagicor is our insurance and our pension provider.
Oh, and there was, do you recall whether there was a major payout some time ago involving dividends?
Including dividends?
Involving dividend payout?
Chairman, I would like to ask the Director of Finance to answer that, because he's also a trustee on the pension plan.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, good morning.
Morning.
Any payments of dividends would have been by Sagicor and not to the beneficiaries of the pension plan.
What is the state of the pension plan at this time?
The pension plan has been audited as at June of 2017. The last actuarial evaluation was done in 2016. Everything is up to date with the pension plan.
Yeah, but Is the pension plan viable at this time?
Yes, it is viable.
Is there a surplus in the pension plan?
At the last actuarial evaluation, the actuary recommended that the company contribute $108,000. That is to cover the administrative fees, and the company has done so.
Is there a surplus in the pension plan?
At this point in time, we do not know because the next actual evaluation is at 2019. At the last actual evaluation in 2016, there was not a surplus because the company was required to contribute $108,000 to cover the administrative fees.
Yeah, I think Mr. Small and then Mr. Hines after.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me. I just wanted to do a quick follow-up. So does the company have a health plan for the staff?
Yes, the company has a health plan.
And who is the health plan with?
The health plan is with Sagicor.
So it's the same company providing services?
Yes.
Could you help me in your document here? There's one of your submissions. We have so much paper from you guys. There's a line item called medical consultation. What does that line item refer to?
That line item refers to staff who were sent for medicals. The company has a policy of sending staff, certain categories of staff, for annual medicals and other categories for
annual medicals.
Annual medicals. So, for example, our welders, for example, receive annual medicals. Our management receive annual medicals. Other staff receive medicals every 2 years. This facility is.
I want to work YTEPP, so let me stop you there, Mr. Because you have a range of benefits. Let me ask another question related to this. So you have a health plan. So if you have a health plan, what is the purpose? How does the company then justify providing medical loans? Because I am listening to you here, and I'm tying all the pieces together. So you have a health plan. On what basis then, what is the justification for giving staff members medical loans? Because you have a health plan, as you just admitted. So the committee continues to be nonplussed. There seems to be benefits upon benefits. I need to leave the parliament and work at YTEPP. I have no medical plan here, so as you would be aware. So could you help us, please? We're confused.
In some instances, we have staff who may have medical emergencies, which the health plan, in terms of the contribution, may not fully cover. The individual may be in need of immediate service, and the company would usually.
I understand what you're saying, and that falls completely outside of your remit. I am struggling to understand a state enterprise that is completely dependent on taxpayers' money to run its operations. This should be in front of your brain every time you do something when you're approving expenditure. We are completely dependent on the men and women watching this program, walking the streets, getting a PAYE taken from their salaries to service and keep you operating. Some of them out there don't have health plans, much less get health loans. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. And I am not against trying to be helpful to workers, but there's a process. And I am not getting that the company is going through this process. So that I hear you, that you as a caring employer, people have situations that come up, and you make a determination that, okay, we'll give them a loan. And I applaud that the humanity in you. Okay? But as a committee that is charged with trying to understand what is happening with state resources, we can't applaud that action, because that action is not defensible. It is not defensible. There's no policy or prescription approval that allows for that. So I understand what you're saying. So let me go back to an earlier question. Mr. Chairman, forgive me. I have a command of the data in front of me. I have a command of what is. So I recall when you said what, and then what happens later on. My last question in the last round, I asked you if anyone related to you was employed at the company and he indicated a negative. Can I ask a different question? Was anyone related to you ever engaged by the company to do services?
No.
No?
No, sir.
At no time?
No time.
I just want it on the record because we have information that is otherwise, but if I am not going to pursue it further, and I'm going to give you the opportunity once here to think through that question and revise your response. I'm going to give you that opportunity.
No.
So if you're holding it, no, that's fine. No. I try to do this the right way. So Mr. Forgini has indicated no. I am accepting a response.
Mr. Forgini, I want to let you know before Mr. David Small continues, you are literally under oath when you are before this committee, and you cannot mislead or knowingly tell untruths to this committee. There are consequences. So that is why he's giving you the opportunity to revisit your position. So I think as chairman, it is my duty to advise you of your responsibility and duty. This is a constitutional body. The Constitution of the Republic of TNT establishes this body. And therefore, when you come before this body, you must speak the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Because if you are found to mislead this, to be misleading rather, this committee, the consequences you alone will bear. So I just want to advise you. Go ahead and proceed, Mr. Small.
I have given Mr. Forgini the opportunity to respond, and he's responding in the negative, so you're holding to that. Yes. Okay, good. Let's leave that. Mr. Forgini, how many persons in YTEPP are assigned fleet cards?
Fleet cards are usually assigned to the vehicles. We have 16 vehicles, so there should be 16 fleet cards.
So fleet cards are assigned only to the vehicles?
Yes, sir.
And the purpose of the fleet cards are to keep your vehicles running?
Yes, sir.
And then officers who are assigned travel allowance, are they using these vehicles?
No, sir.
They're not?
No.
No, we just want that on the record. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will pause and allow.
Yes, Mr. Hines, please.
At this time for my next round.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Forgini, the vehicle of which you spoke earlier that is unmarked, contrary to the Cabinet's and the Ministry's directive that you decided will remain unmarked, do you have access to that vehicle outside of working hours and on the weekends?
Yes, sir, I do.
Who pays for the gas for that vehicle?
The company does.
Is that one of the fleet cars to which you just spoke?
Yes, it is.
So when Mr. Small asked you whether any personnel have a fleet card, that wasn't altogether, your answer wasn't true. You have a fleet card for the vehicle that you have ascribed to yourself, am I correct?
Yes.
And YTEPP pays the gas bill.
Which is part of the compensation package in terms of a fully maintained company vehicle.
And no one else has access to that vehicle for its daily use other than you.
Correct.
But you are also in receipt, by virtue of your self-appointed, without the approval of the ministerial committee's approval, you are also in receipt of a transport allowance in addition to your lofty salary. You are in receipt of a transport allowance for a fully maintained company car.
It's either or.
It's either or?
It's either or.
Do you receive this transport allowance?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I pay a benefit in kind of $3,000 per month to use the vehicle.
Just a second. Take it easy. What did you say?
I pay a benefit in kind tax of $3,000 per month for using the company's vehicle.
Yes, it says here, a fully maintained company car valued at a maximum of $400,000 exclusive of VAT, or in lieu, a transport allowance of $3,500 per month.
It is either or.
I know.
do not have a transport allowance.
He's not saying that.
But you use the vehicle.
Yes.
And that is, but you are entitled to a company vehicle valued at $400,000, right? What type of vehicle is it?
It's a Prado.
What's the value of the Prado?
The value now is is less than 400,000. I took the vehicle when it was 415,000. According to those terms, the value of the vehicle to be ascribed is 400,000 plus VAT. I have only had that vehicle in use for the...
And why is YTEPP paying for the gas then?
Because it's supposed to be a fully maintained company vehicle.
But aren't you now the owner of the vehicle? Mr. Forgini?
The vehicle still belongs to YTEPP, sir.
You're confusing us, you know.
The vehicle belongs to YTEPP.
Yes.
I pay a benefit in kind for using the vehicle.
You pay a benefit in kind.
Yes.
And what's that?
Benefit in kind is a tax required by inland revenue with regards to the percentage of the depreciable value of the asset.
So the vehicle will ultimately be yours.
There is a provision under the Transport Act where after 5 years, vehicles can be sold to employees of the company first before anyone else.
P.S.
So the vehicle could be anyone's after
P.S.
5 years.
Could you bring some clarification to this committee on this very complex arrangement I'm hearing about here? And I still want to know, why is YTEPP paying for the gas for weekend use, night use, whole day, whole night? Unmarked vehicle. Let me say for the record, the cabinet issued a directive to all ministries and departments a long time ago when we just came to office. Ministers of government are unable to do that. We cannot and do not take state vehicles for our personal use outside of work hours. That's why we get transport allowance and loan facilities for vehicles. P.S., could you explain to this committee what I'm trying to understand from Mr. Forgini in circumstances where I have convinced myself, I have concluded that YTEPP is not for the students, and I'll come for that. YTEPP is for the benefit of the operatives in YTEPP. But P.S., could you help us, please?
I believe we need a very serious review of how state assets are being used at YTEPP. That is clear. In terms of the specific circumstance in this regarding that vehicle, we need to review.
All right, I'll content myself with that for the time being. P.S., Mr. Chairman, one more thing. And when I speak, I direct these issues to Mr. Forgini as the CEO, who has been sitting around for 12 years in YTEPP. But this is to all of YTEPP. Madam Chairman, I hope you are taking close note. You are newly minted. You now have the responsibility on behalf of the government to manage and to oversee the operations of this state entity. And I hope that you are taking a close note on what we are dealing with here. Yes, sir. Good. I see here in your follow-up responses to us, which we have in front of us, Mr. Chairman, this document, right? At page 35, the question was asked, what were the reasons for the increasing costs in this account during the period 2008 and 2015, operating cost of 2014, costs of operations? And the answer we got was increase in salaries and wages, increase in rent, increase in security as a result of outsourcing security services, increase in utilities and telephone, increase in materials and inventories consumed, increase in insurance, increase in validation fees. But we have noted from previous submissions before this committee that the one thing that did not increase was the number of students, participants in the YTEPP program. In fact, the figures show us that the number of participants reduced by about 50% while everything else was increasing. Mr. Forgini, how do you explain that against the background of my own conclusion that this thing called YTEPP has been operating for years now, not for the benefit of the trainees, but for the benefit of those who are blessed to work in it and supposedly for it? How do you explain that? Everything else has increased except the number of young people in this country who are supposed to be benefiting from this program. Explain that to us, please.
If you may, Chairman, I'd like to pass it to two persons to answer.
Mr. Forgini,
I'm actually Director of Finance who has the information before him that can speak to the increase in costs.
Mr. Forgini,
if that is okay, Mr.
We'll come
Chairman.
to the director in a little while. I would like you as the head of the fountain for 12 years, in the face of all that we have heard around here, I would like you to explain that for the benefit of the record on oath.
With regard to the increasing costs, we would have explained previously that costs would have increased when we would have changed our methods from NEC, mostly NEC certification to CBQ certification. CBQ certification is a little more expensive. The other thing, in 2011, YTEPP took responsibility for the retraining program. So we had an increase in staff. We had about 50 to 60 persons that were not on staff before that became staff. Their program is a program that utilizes training providers. So we had training providers' salaries as well. So the cost during that period would have increased because we had responsibility for another program, which expanded our reach, which expanded our ability to provide services. In terms of the decreasing numbers would have occurred previous to 2011. We did two cycles, two 6-month cycles, which gave us a student population of about 9,000 or more. After 2011, we had one cycle because it was felt that we should focus more on CBQ, which ran for 9 months. That reduced the number of persons involved in the program. Over the years as well, from 2015 onwards, YTEPP had reduced budgetary allocation, which continued to impact the number of persons that we could have attracted.
Well, typically, might I intervene to say, the way the budgeting process goes, they look to see what the performance was in the previous year or years, and then decide how much to allocate. Anybody looking at your performance records from a budgeting standpoint would have seen that the number of students going down, and I'm not surprised that you would have had a cut quite apart from the general economic problems we are facing. But let me bring to your attention again, in your responses to us at page 39, we see here that legal and professional fees increased in 2010 from 559 plus thousand to 10 million in 2011, to 9.7 million in 2012, 7.2 million in 2013, and back up again at 10.7 million in 2014. I want to point out to you as well that the entertainment for the corresponding period moved from 548,000 in 2011, entertainment, 481,000, a small entity like YTEPP. How many personnel you have now altogether? Remind me.
Altogether, it's about 600 persons.
Entertainment moved in 2012 to 719,000. In 2013, 830,000. In 2014, 1.2 million and climbing, everything for the benefit and for the well-being and the happiness and the gaiety of the personnel working in YTEPP going up and up and up. And the people in this country who are supposed to be benefiting the most are disappearing from YTEPP. Madam Chair, I am not going to speak too much in advance of my colleagues, but things are rotten from our perspective. I've been sitting on this committee, just to conclude, for quite some years. I chaired it as well. And this is probably the worst I have seen. And my our committee will decide on the approach we will take, but this is clearly the worst I have seen.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond? May I?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
In terms of legal and professional fees, that is where the training course for training providers associated with the retraining program resides. That program uses persons who are experts in their various fields. They usually are persons who provide apprenticeship options for our trainees, and that is where that resides. So we have training providers rather than instructors associated with YTEPP. That training is outsourced, and we pay the training providers a per trainee course for training. In terms of entertainment, again, it's a categorization. In the note under which the honorable member was reading, there's an explanation for entertainment. It says this includes mainly the costs associated with airfare and hotel accommodation for technical staff who are part of the quality assurance system of the program. That is training specialists, curriculum specialists, technical supervisors, and internal verifiers. The costs increase as a result of the retraining program being merged with YTEPP.
That's my point. All the training and the cost, the students are disappearing from the program. That's my problem. But before I close, in respect of these loans that you decided along with your finance director to grant, you said that since the state performance monitoring manual is silent on it, you revert to the company's memorandum and articles of association. I would like you, promptly after these proceedings, to direct us the particular articles or clauses that would support that in writing. Secondly, that's quite
Sorry,
okay.
we submitted that before, you know. We submitted
did?
already, yes.
All right, good. We'll pay some closer attention to that. And finally, I want a clear answer to this. Since you decided that you would make loans available to members of staff chosen by you in certain circumstances for medical loans, and this is a follow-up on what my colleague and fellow committee member, Mr. Small, raised with you, I would like you to indicate clearly to us on what proper lawful authority you founded that decision.
I would like to say that that policy has been in place for more than 20 years.
I am not asking that.
It wasn't a policy that I founded.
I'm not asking that. I am asking you to tell this committee, since you are at the helm, and you have been for 12 years, I would like you to tell us with the responsibility that vests in you, or is vested in you and rests in you, on what basis you decided to make loans available to members of staff in the circumstances as you described them.
Based on the policies that were there, the guidelines that were there when I became CEO, I didn't make a change to what was already there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you kindly, Chairman. Mr. CEO, I had raised on the last occasion the question of your authority in granting loans to staff. you responded that you were doing so based against a board decision. You were asked to submit the evidence. I have before me a submission by your good self titled Appendix 8. Do you have it before you?
Yes, I do.
All right, Appendix 8 reads, copy of board minutes dated 19th March 2003, refunding for educational training by the company with recovery by way of salary deductions. I have read the two-page document, one of which states, meeting number 3 held on Wednesday, 19th March 2003, confirm minutes of meeting of the Board of Directors of YTEPP held in the boardroom of the company's registered office, 22 to 24 St. Vincent Street, Port of Spain, on the 19th of March. Could you, Mr. Forgini, direct me to the specific decision by the board on that day for the implementation of such a policy? I am unable to identify it, but perhaps my ability is not at the level. So could you please indicate which aspect of this two-page document clearly outlined that the board on that day took a decision to implement an educational training policy with recovery by way of salary deductions?
In the document that accompanied that appendix, the organization would have indicated that we were unable to find the date at which the policy would have been approved by the board. And what we submitted was minutes that we could have found from meetings that made reference to the board encouraging staff members to take advantage of the educational loan facilities. What I was told is that those policies, the administrative policies, came forward during the World Bank period, and that's the same policies we are using today.
Mr. Chairman, if you would permit me, Mr. Forgini, you operate at the level of Chief Executive Officer. That means that you have responsibility for the full operations of this company. Are you telling this committee, and by extension Trinidad and Tobago and the world, that you have implemented what you want us to believe to be a policy, and you did not have sight of the policy document? Is that what you're telling us?
That policy has been in existence for almost 30 years. I do not have the information with regard to when the policy was adopted by the board. What I also have is information in the minutes which relates to the board's hiring of a consultant to update those policies. The board during that period did not approve that document. The board after that did not approve the document. The new document is before the board.
Mr. Fortuny, let me stop you, please. I have to protect you from yourself, because as a Chief Executive Officer, you are not conveying an understanding of the principles that guides good governance. You have the responsibility. Anyone taking up a responsibility as Chief Executive Officer of an organization, the very first documents you call for are the policy documents. And you familiarize yourself with those policy documents. Because then, and only then, would you, as the CEO, have a basis for implementation of whatever practices that you may have met in the organization. I want to, Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. CEO, I want to express my, my profound disappointment that you have placed certain information before this committee without evidence. We have requested you to supply us with the evidence, and you have failed to do so, but you consistently respond by saying that is the policy in place. You cannot provide any documentation on the policy, and therefore one is left with little before one but to believe that you have been operating without proper authorization. Because what is stated in what you submitted to us, the Chief Executive Officer said that employees are encouraged to improve their skills within the context of a company policy on training that provides 50% reimbursement of fees upon the successful completion of approved courses and the funding of elected training by the company and recovery by way of salary deduction. That is a statement. I can't even say that's a statement of fact. It's a statement reflected in the minutes, a statement ascribed as coming from the Chief Executive Officer, but there is no policy document. So, Mr. Chairman, that's one. Two, what steps have you initiated as the CEO based on the concerns that we would have raised with you on the last occasion when you were here on the 20th of June? What concrete steps have you taken to ensure the recovery of all those outstanding bad debts from those persons employed with YTEPP?
In terms of the bad debts,
I'm talking about the loans to staff.
Right. We have no
they are bad debts
we have no bad debts in loans for staff.
You cannot speak over me.
Sorry.
Okay? You may be coming a little hot under the collar, but you can't speak over me. I will appreciate that. The question pertains to the loans granted by staff for which you have not presented a policy to this committee. That policy remains outstanding. And my question is, what steps have you taken to recover the outstanding sums owed by the staff who are still employed with YTEPP?
First, there are no bad debts in terms of the staff loan. The issue we had was where there was an overpayment when we did our remuneration. That person was paying a limited amount over a period of time. As of last week, the individual paid the majority. The individual has just $373 remaining.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair of the Board, I strongly advise that you ensure that the management of YTEPP does not proceed to grant further loans to staff until the policy is found. Because it seems as though the policy is lost somewhere.
That has been stopped, Madam, as of January. And I have been, at our last board meeting, instructions were given to the Director of Finance to speak to all of those persons who had outstanding debts, and that was done, and that the debt was recovered, or the greater portion of it.
All right. I am comforted. I just want to clarify an issue that my colleague asked you a few questions on Mr. Fortuny. Having been in the business of negotiations for over 30 years and understanding how terms and conditions are arrived at, it has to do with your remuneration package. And I'm dealing with the document. I'm dealing with the document submitted that was referred to earlier. A letter to you dated 10th of January 2013. That document I'm referring to. The salary stated. And then under transport allowance, you have transport allowance, you have a housing allowance, you have a cell allowance, you have an entertainment allowance. That's your remuneration package. Would you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, under transport allowance, it states clearly, a fully maintained company car valued at a maximum of $400,000 exclusive of value-added tax, or in lieu, a transport allowance of $3,500 per month. You had an option. Could you advise this committee which of the two options you accepted?
I accepted the option of having a fully maintained company vehicle.
You accepted that option. But if you accepted that option, how then, what is benefit in kind then? And how does that relate to your terms and conditions of employment? Because it's not stated here. It's very clear. One, a company, a fully maintained company vehicle, or a transport allowance. So that if you accepted the fully maintained company car, what is benefit in kind?
Could I ask the Director of Finance?
I'm speaking to you, Mr. Fortuny. You
yes,
are the Chief Executive Officer. These are your terms and conditions. Yes. You may consult with your director, yes, but I would like, it pertains to you, Mr. Fortuny. How could you direct somebody else to answer?
Because I had previously indicated that when you have a company vehicle, at least as far as it was explained to me, there is a payment that you may call benefit in kind for using the vehicle. It is calculated based on the annual depreciable value of that vehicle, to which I pay $3,000 per month to the Inland Revenue for. That is what benefit in kind is.
I will pause on Mr. Fortuny. Mr. P.S., I would like to hear your views on this issue.
On that particular item, I will have to review and revert.
Pardon me?
I will have to review. I myself am not clear.
Well, would you be able to put that in? When you review, could you submit that in writing, Des? Yeah.
That is a formula, Mr. Chairman, that I am not familiar with at all. And therefore, I would like to ask the CEO to provide all information to this committee with regards to the transport allowance, the arrangement that he has in place, and the authority for such arrangement. Because when the CPO determines terms and conditions, you either have this or you have that. You can't be like 90% pregnant or 80% pregnant. It's either you're pregnant or you're not. Having said that, I will await the additional information in that regard. Mr. CEO, you indicated earlier that the pension for staff, the provider is Tapsy-Jahoor.
Correct.
We would have also been informed that, not by yourself, that a valuation was done in June 2016, and there was no surplus, and the organization was required to pay $108,000 to cover administrative fees. Could you explain to us the basis? Why did the organization have to pay $108,000 for administrative expenses on the pension plan?
Mr. Chairman, as part of the operating procedure of the pension plan, administrative charges are charged against the pension plan, and the organization is required to make those payments. When it was determined by the actuary that there was a shortfall of $108,000, we got board approval to approve the payment thereafter, and the payments were made.
Is the pension plan a sound, what you can deem to be a sound pension plan?
Yes, it is, Madam Chair.
When the employees retire from the organization, are they paid their pensions on a timely basis?
As far as we know, yes, Madam.
There is no employee from the organization who retired and had problems in seeking their pension benefits?
There were a few instances where Sagicor delayed in communicating to the actuary to calculate the benefits payable to the individuals. When those were eventually determined, the payments were made to them.
Mr. CEO, is there a situation in YTEPP where you have traveling officers who are in receipt of traveling allowances, but who use the company's vehicle in the performance of their duties?
No, ma'am, we have no such instance.
Did you ever have such an instance or instances in the organization?
Not that I'm aware of, ma'am.
Do you know of any situation where any of your management, your top management, including yourself, families had access to any of the company's vehicle?
No, ma'am. No one ever had access to the company's vehicles.
Do you have a facilities officer on this establishment of the organization?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Is that officer involved in any aspect of the tendering procedures within the organization?
Yes, he's a part of the tenders committee.
What is the responsibility of the facilities officer? What are some of his responsibilities?
Some of his responsibilities include ensuring that the facilities are maintained, that repairs to the facilities are provided, and also in terms of projects, he also functions as our projects officer, and he advises the committee with regards to various projects, the tenders committee.
So that your facilities officer, one of that person's responsibility would be liaising with the providers.
Yes.
If that is would you say that's a major function of the facilities officer?
Yes, it is.
Well, if that is so, why would you put your facilities officer in charge of your tendering procedures?
He is not in charge. He provides information to the committee.
You just told us that he is. You just shared that with the committee. That's why I'm going along the line of my inquiry with you. Is based on what you have placed before us. Would you like to change what you placed before us?
He is not in charge of the tenders committee. He is a member of the tenders committee. He provides information. And when I say provides information, he does not make decisions in terms of how the tender is awarded. He just provides technical information.
He is a member of the tenders committee, yes? That's what you just said. Mr. Chairman, let me ask you for your assistance, because clearly I'm incapable of extracting the correct information from Mr. Forgini.
Yeah, Mr. Forgini, could you, this facility manager that has been officer, I think the member is asking, first of all, you have a tenders committee.
Yes.
Who's the chairman of the tenders committee?
Previously, the chairman of the tenders committee was a board member. And
but right now,
I am the person responsible for the tenders committee.
So you are the chairman of the committee?
Based on the procurement manual that we have, it is recommended that the chief executive officer or the financial officer chair the committee.
But the CEO, can you make a copy of that? Is this a manual?
It's the manual centers on the new procurement legislation. So in line with that, what we did is we disbanded the tenders committee of the board, and we established a new tenders committee, which is made up of the chief executive officer, the director of finance, the manager of finance.
All right. Can I ask the PS in the Ministry of Education whether this procedure is correct, as far as you're aware, for a CEO to be the chairman of a tenders committee? And he's saying consistent with the new procurement arrangements under the new procurement rules and law. Can you advise us? And I'd like to get the views after of the investments division.
But, I just would like to place on record, I mean, we as a parliament dealt with procurement legislation, and then as a cabinet, we oversaw the implementation throughout, and we gave mandates throughout for its implementation. I have not seen anything specifically that suggests that the CEO must be or should be. I haven't seen that. I know persons who are mandated to establish procurement units, but it is just striking me a little strange that the CEO would be chairing or the head of the tenders committee. But all I can say for the time being is I recall seeing nothing in law nor in policy that suggests that, and it does feel a little discomforting, but we'll get to the bottom of it.
Can I ask the PS to guide us on this matter, please?
There are manuals developed by the Ministry of Finance for all ministries and departments in terms of procurement. I know there was a special manual for state agencies. In terms of the specific composition of the tenders committee, I can't recall at this time, but I know there is a manual.
Is Mr. Forgini saying to this committee that based on his reading of that manual, you know the manual of which the PS just spoke?
Yes, sir.
Are you saying that it mandates that the CEO must head the tenders committee?
Yes, not that it mandates, but it makes recommendations as to who should head the committee. This took place at the start of this year, where upon receiving the documents from the Ministry of Education, what we did was we changed.
You have a very fine way, excuse me, and forgive my apparent discourtesy. I'm taking responsibility for that. You have a rather wonderful way of, I asked a simple question. The question I asked, for the benefit of those who are listening that, a very, very simple question. It is, from your reading of that manual, is it that it recommends that the CEO should head the tenders committee?
It says the CEO can be.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask the investment division to give us some clarification on this?
We all know that there have been a chairman, a board appointed to the procurement regulator. And this person will be the person to make regulations to be adopted. In the interim, well, what is the practice now is that the procurement policy, companies have a procurement policy that has been approved by the Minister of Finance, and companies are required to abide by that policy until such time as the procurement regulator makes policies.
And does it specifically treat the matter I've just raised, from your knowledge?
It should.
In terms of who should head it?
I am not okra with two are the members
All
of the
right,
committee.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman, I think it's
The matter that was referred to, do you have those documents available in terms of the procurement policy? Those manuals that we were talking, that we were brought up with it?
We will have access to draft. They are draft documents. But the final document will be prepared by the procurement regulator.
So those documents are purely draft documents, as far as you're aware?
They are.
So, Mr. Fortuny, if those documents are draft documents, that they are not final documents, how can you insert yourself as the chairman of the Tenders Committee if those documents that we are being told are only draft? And before you answer, can I ask the Investment Division, have you issued instructions to the state enterprises in Trinidad and Tobago to effect and operationalize those draft manuals as clear policy guidelines for procurement purposes? Has the Investment Division given such instructions?
No, we have not given such instructions because that is under the remit of the new procurement reform.
And as far as you are aware, are you aware whether the procurement regulator has done such?
No, I am not aware.
How long has the procurement regulator been in office? Just remind us.
Early this year, January, February, I can't remember the exact date.
Yes, I seem to recall you right, sometime earlier this year.
Yes, so Mr. Fortuny, yes.
I recall Ms. Suku saying a while ago that there is a draft document that companies are required to use until such time as the procurement regulator implements policy. Am I correct?
The ministry has a procurement policy which is included in the manual that companies are required to adopt. If there are any amendments to that policy, it has to be approved by the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Fortuny, is this the document that you're referring to?
Not the State Enterprises Review Manual. It is the document that was sent to us from the Ministry of Education, and more specifically, based on correspondence received from the ministry indicating that the new procurement legislation is expected to be enacted. And we are supposed to provide a gap analysis as to our readiness, and that is what we did.
Mr. Fortuny?
Yes, sir.
Could you provide to this committee copies of the manuals that you have been using to inform your thinking and insert your good self in the capacity as chairman? Could you provide those documents to this committee?
Can. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Foster, come in, please.
How long have you been acting as Permanent Secretary, Education Ministry?
January.
And before that?
Before that, I was Deputy Permanent Secretary, Education, in charge of infrastructure.
Been at the ministry for a while?
No, that's only from October last year.
You started at Ministry of Education October last year?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the documentation referred to by the CEO?
From the point of view that, yes, and the procurement documents, yes. In terms of I'm familiar with the document as it pertains to the ministry in particular, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the ministry in compliance with the Act. And we also, I believe we did send documents to all our agencies, trying to get them in compliance with the Procurement Act as quickly as possible.
This committee?
In terms of these, we can provide copies of the document, but I cannot recall at this time specifically the composition that was required for the committee. I can't recall it at this time.
The investment division, can you indicate to us this state enterprises performance monitoring manual, is it still in effect, or has it been superseded by these draft manuals that we have been informed about in possession? And apparently some of those documents are in the possession of Mr. Forgery. What is the state of play in terms of this state enterprises performance manual?
Chair, that state enterprise manual is still in effect until such time as the procurement regulator makes new regulations to guide companies.
So if this is still in effect until the procurement regulator makes new guidelines, then under Section 2 of this manual, Appendix B, headed Administration, Item 2.3, it reads, Composition of the Tenders Committee. Let me read. The committee shall comprise a minimum of 5 members who shall be 1, 2 members of the board, excluding its chairman, one of whom shall be elected as chairman of the committee. 2, the chief executive officer, designate of the state agency, the financial controller, and the legal officer. Now, this is what governs the tenders arrangement for state enterprises pending the regulator issuing final documents to state enterprises. And, of course, the Ministry of Finance, through the investment division, will then issue those and indicate this is now policy. In the absence of that, this is what you adhere to. So we are trying to understand what inspired you to use draft manuals without referring to the Ministry of Finance or your line ministry to determine whether you can do so in the absence of, conscious that this policy obtains under this manual. Could you guide us on this?
Before February of this year, that is the process. The process as outlined in the manual that was followed. When we received correspondence from the ministry indicating that we should get in alignment with the documents that were sent, that is when the change took place. The documents, as stated, are draft documents. So in February, we would have made the change in line with that.
Can I ask Mr. Foster Cummings to continue?
I would like to get some clarity, because I think we are mixing things up here. I'm getting the feeling that I'm hearing manuals and policy and documents, and there seems to be some mix-up. I'm going back to Ms. Suku. Earlier on, you said that there was a manual that companies were expected to use until such time as the procurement regulator makes policy. I did not get the impression that you were referring to the manual just referred the state performance manual. Could you clarify that for me, please?
It is the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual. Included in the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual is the procurement policy.
You were specifically referring to the procurement policy as stated in the State Enterprises Performance Manual.
Yes.
I did not get that impression.
Well,
thank you for clarifying. You said, subsequent to the submission by Ms. Suku, that the ministry was attempting to get the companies under its remit to prepare itself for the coming on stream of the new procurement legislation. That is what I got from your submission. Could you please clarify for the committee what steps the ministry took in connection with that?
Since we have been informed that the regulator is going to be on board, the ministry has been taking a number of steps to bring the ministry into compliance and to bring the agencies into compliance. As part of the whole thrust, we have been inquiring as to where they are, how they are aware of the Act. We've been providing them with documentation that has been provided to us because some of us have been on the procurement training. So the manuals, the draft manuals that have been prepared, because that is what you are supposed to do as a ministry. You're supposed to customize the procurement handbooks in preparation for the coming of the legislation. So we have provided them with information. We have inquired as to where you are with procurement and what is your plan, what is your time frame for implementation. Do you have everything that the Act will require so that when the Act is fully proclaimed, all entities will be compliant? Because what we did not want to happen was that the Act will be proclaimed and any entity under the Ministry of Education will not be in a position to be compliant, because the Act has some rather stringent provisions in terms of reporting to the public, and we did not want that to happen.
As Permanent Secretary, in an attempt to prepare the companies, the units under your purview, you've been sending out information to advise them to prepare themselves. Is this just information that they must read and not adopt at this time, or is it that they have to start to put certain things in place in preparation for the procurement regulator?
In terms of best practice, the new Act deals with best practice procurement. So if your agency is already doing best practice procurement, you will not have a problem. If you are not doing best practice procurement, it's time for you to tighten up. The information provided was to make sure that you are aware of the Act, because a number of the agencies were not aware. They were aware of the Act, but they were not aware of how close you were to implementation. So that was something we needed to do. In terms of time frame for implementation, we needed to tell them, this is coming. You need to put these things in place. Make sure your documentation is in place. Make sure you have a database that the regulator can look into to make sure you're prepared to publish what you will be procuring on an annual basis. Because as part of the Act, you are required to prepare an annual procurement plan so that everyone can see what the agency is going to procure during the year. The ministry is in the process of doing that, and we wanted to make sure the state agencies are in the same position.
Now, you gather what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. I want to be sure that the agencies, and not only YTEPP, in the information that they receive from the ministry, these guidelines, whether they are draft, somebody said it's just draft guidelines, whether it is expected that these, because this might be happening somewhere else, whether it is expected that the agencies under the ministry will utilize the information received from the ministry to start to put things in place in preparation for the procurement regulator putting their own policies in place when the time comes.
In terms of bringing your agencies to a position to do best practice procurement, yes. Because we should be doing best practice procurement right now. We should not have to wait for the Act to do that for us. In terms of the specifics to change compositions of committees, no. Because at the end of the day, the regulator is not here yet. the guidelines have not been done.
I get that. Yeah. I'm clear on that. Okay. You have several enterprises other than YTEPP under the ministry. Costat also? Can you tell us of a few? YTEPP, Costat, which other will fall under? You don't have to go to any
MIC, NESC, NTA, NEHURST, UE, UTT, all these agencies.
Organizations will have to report closely to you?
Yes.
Well, directly to you, I should say.
Yes.
In terms of the information coming out in this inquiry, would you say that this is familiar to you in terms of the method of operation of the other agencies under the ministry? Are you clear on what I'm asking?
Yes, I'm clear. What I have heard here gives cause for concern. We have some issues with some agencies, yes, but in terms of the governance, I think there is definitely a problem. I believe it has to do with the fact that for a long time, no board was in place. And when a board is not in place, because the board is really the first line, if the first line is not in place, the ministry is at a disadvantage. And the other issue, I think, is the fact that YTEPP appears to have moved from one ministry's control to another ministry's control. When that happens, there is a tendency for things to slip. And it appears that that may have also occurred to some extent.
I'd want to ask, as Permanent Secretary, what steps do you intend to take to address what you have indicated is of concern to you?
What we have done, what we are trying to do right now is to put into place a system of governance for not just YTEPP, but for all agencies in terms of reporting on board minutes, policies, procedures, readiness for the new Procurement Act. We have a very small group that we are trying to give them the tools to be able to monitor. Because, for example, when board minutes come, reviewing of the board minutes has to be done within a context. The context would have to be whatever policy documents that you have. We are trying now to get from the entities under our control all policy documents so that we can check that against what is to be done. The procedure that we intend to put in place would be perhaps at this point in time a small group in terms of perhaps legal, finance, internal audit so that it could be filtered before going to the minister. So you can have a technical review of all documents from the agencies so that they can monitor.
Which division in your ministry would be responsible for something like that?
That would be the Technical Research Planning and Technical Services Division, which is experiencing some staffing constraints right now that we're attempting to fix.
Yes. Go ahead, Chairman.
You've been there since January?
September 2017, actually. But January, acting Permanent Secretary, yes.
So during that time, before this inquiry, have you had a good working relationship with YTEPP? And I'm speaking specifically about the CEO here. Have you been receiving reports, board minutes? You're aware of what is happening in YTEPP?
Before January.
From the time that you have been acting as Permanent Secretary?
In that period of time, I think we've only received one board minute.
No, we always get it.
Yeah, board minutes always come on time. We have never had a problem with the board minutes from YTEPP.
So let me just ask before I pass back to the chairman. And I'm not dealing, I am looking at the process. The agency reports to the ministry through minutes, reports, etc. And some unit in the ministry is supposed to be checking this information coming to flag things that don't fall within what the ministry's expectation is. Has that been happening? Because for me, for the ministry to be surprised at things happening at any of the institutes, any of the organizations, when we come to an inquiry like this, is unacceptable to me. Because if there's a reporting relationship, the management reports to the board, the organization is reporting to the ministry. When we come to an inquiry like this, the ministry, through that reporting relationship, should be picking these things up as they arise and taking corrective action long before we come to an inquiry like this. And this is not personal to you. I'm saying the process should be that these minutes that are sent to the ministry is not to put in a file to gather dust. It is the expectation that some unit is going to be perusing these documents to make sure that these things fall in line with what the ministry's expectation is. So I'm saying if that is not happening, that is an area I want to suggest that you seek to strengthen.
It is happening at this point in time. Minutes are reviewed for not just YTEPP, but for all agencies. Red flags are brought to the attention of the executive and the minister. The depth of it needs to be improved, and hence our campaign to get as much documentation as possible from the agency so we'll be better placed to review minutes, and not only minutes, in terms of other reports that we need to put in to get. Because we can't, minutes alone don't tell the entire story.
Do you have, Mr. Myers, a monitoring and evaluation unit in your ministry consistent with what Mr. Cummings has revealed, so that when minutes come in, reports come in, there's this particular unit that would be focused on analyzing, assessing, evaluating, and taking action? Do you have such a unit?
There is a unit in the ministry tasked with reviewing compliance and reporting issues from all our state agencies.
And what's the name of that unit?
That would be
Research Planning and Technical Services.
Research Planning and Technical Services.
Research Planning
and Technical Services.
And no, we are talking about a specific unit, because that research planning unit that you mentioned would have other responsibilities within the ministry. We are talking about a specialized unit called the Monitoring and Evaluation Unit that will deal specifically with state entities that fall under your remit. So what Mr. Cummings is saying, a lot of these things that are happening would not appear as a surprise to the ministry. Would you agree with me, Mr. Myers, that we need such an agency or unit?
But yes, but to explain, the unit that we speak of, the Planning Technical Services Division, for want of a better word, that division came to the ministry when the ministry was merged with TESS. And when that ministry was in its former incarnation, its primary responsibility was the monitoring of the state agencies under the former ministry. It continued that role. With respect to monitoring and evaluation, the ministry had a few M&E resources, but their contracts have expired. The ministry is attempting to renew those contracts and to get people. We are also reviewing the structure of a lot of these divisions with the intention of streamlining the operation.
Yeah. Mr. Myers, I think that there's need for the Ministry of Education to strengthen the monitoring and oversight responsibility of those state entities that fall under your remit. I'm seeing there is a weakness in that particular area of your operation. Madam Chairman of YTEPP, could you explain to this committee whether your board under your charge in the last 6 months, seeing that committee that Mr. Fortuny referred to, Tenders Committee, only under his chairmanship, took effect in February. Could you tell us whether your board had granted approval for the establishment of that committee with the CEO being chairman, which is contrary to the state performance monitoring manual?
I can't say if we did, I cannot be sure, but if we did, it would have been on the advice of the management committee and the CEO.
No, but what I'm saying is that the board has a very crucial responsibility for policy formulation and direction. And you cannot be dependent on the management of YTEPP to direct your policy. Yes, you have to direct them. That is why you're a board. So what I'm asking you, whether under your stewardship, you had granted permission to the management to establish this committee, this tenders committee, with Mr. Forgini as chairman.
Yes, sir.
And what are you doing now to correct that? Because that is improper.
Yes, well, at our next board meeting, we would look at that process, and of course, we will rescind that decision.
Madam Chair, may I say before I ask Mr. Hines to intervene? No, Mr. Small and then Mr. Hines. May I suggest, with the greatest respect, that what we have witnessed thus far at YTEPP, last time you were here and now, is the need for your board, with some degree of urgency, to establish a forensic audit dating back to 2008 to the current period into the operations of YTEPP, because something is fundamentally wrong with that organization, and we need answers. And the only way we can get independent answers is through an independent forensic audit that will be commissioned and established by your board. Something is wrong. So we ask you to take charge and not to allow the management to be in charge. Because it appears from what you have just said, the management is running the board. The board is supposed to be in charge of the management and not the reverse. So please take charge, or otherwise the government may have to discharge you. That is not your role to take instructions from the management. So please get your roles clearly, properly outlined and articulated and effected. Okay?
Yes,
I now
sir.
call on Mr. Small and then Mr. Hines, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin my couple of last questions, I want to echo your point, because I have a strong handle on governance, it is the duty of the board to interrogate the recommendations of management. Where management, we have seen on this committee where management have been very creative. It is the responsibility of the board to interrogate any recommendation that the management brings. Not that you are against the recommendation of the management, but it must demonstrate robustness. They must be able to provide the requisite detail and supporting information, because the board, at the end of the day, the board has that responsibility to take whatever blows come to the action. So it is your responsibility and your team to say, yes, your recommendation is interesting. Please present to us and tell us why in the greatest detail. In the greatest detail, because that is your protection. I wanted to just first my couple of questions to the Permanent Secretary. Mr. Permanent Secretary, could you advise us, probably from your files or from your time, when did YTEPP secede? Well, let me help you, because what we've been sitting here overseeing is the Republic of YTEPP, a new welfare state in Trinidad and Tobago. And I say that deliberately. If you're an employee of YTEPP, you have access to salary, transport allowance, cell phone allowance, medical loan, educational loan, salary advances, health plan, pension plan. It's a complete welfare state. And for some employees, you also get access to auction of spare materials and overseas travel. so that when you list all of these wonderful benefits, I'm sure lots of people would love to work at YTEPP. I have a question for Mr. Grant, who is the financial. How many persons at the YTEPP have corporate credit cards?
The organization has one corporate credit card.
And
the CEO has control of that.
The CEO has control of that?
Yes.
All right, well,
it is issued to Mr. Forgini, the CEO.
And it is for?
For the organization to acquire things online.
Things online?
Purchases online.
What's the limit?
Airfare, etc.
What's the limit?
$20,000.
Huh?
$20,000.
20,000. Okay.
Through the chairman, we'd like to understand, the things that have been purchased online with this corporate credit card.
For instance, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
you will provide in writing, not for now, because we're starting to run on time. Through the chair, the committee would like to receive, for probably the past couple of years at least, the statements on that card and the items that have been purchased and yeah, all the details related to the card, and then what has been happening with the use of that card. I wasn't aware that the company had a corporate credit card, but I asked and I got a response. So it's very interesting. I suppose the permanent secretary will also be a little surprised about that. Let me move on. I want to be deliberate with time.
Yeah, before you move on, in whose name is this credit card issued in?
YTEPP Limited.
YTEPP Limited.
And who's the signatory to use the card?
The CEO.
The CEO.
I am.
Okay, that's his card.
No one else.
Could you provide in writing, Mr. Forgini, all the online credit that you have been able to access, right? Over the last, how many years this has been going on for? The corporate credit card.
Since 2009 or 10.
Since 2009?
Yes.
We want to get a list. We want to get a list of...
We want statements.
We want a list of all the purchases and the accompanying bank statements between 2009 and the present time. So we would be able to know exactly who is purchasing, what they are purchasing, the value they are purchasing at, the period of time that has been done, and what exactly are they purchasing. Because we are being told it is being done on behalf of YTEPP for whatever purposes. So we want some details on that. Because as Mr. Hines said, this is a question of us as a committee protecting taxpayers' dollars and ensuring that we have value for money for whatever we execute through these state entities. So please provide those things as I've requested. Mr. Small, continue.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I pulled these little nuggets out of the documentation that has come to us. So let me ask again, I have another question from Mr. Grant. I'm giving Mr. Forgini a bly on this question. The money market fund. You have a money market fund reported in your accounts. It has several $1 million in it. And at different times through the years, I'm seeing the fund fluctuating in value in terms of 1 year's 9 million, next is 7 million, this year's 5 million. I am not sure, one, what is the authority to establish this fund? Where's the source of funds? Where do you get money to put in this fund? And then I'm sure the fund provides returns. How is that process managed? Could you help the committee to understand?
Mr. Chair, the fund would have been established from income generated by YTEPP Limited through its various income-generating activities over the years. The money market fund is a UTC account where the investment is held. The interest that is earned is accounted for in our accounts, and the movement in the fund is accounted in the financial statements.
So let me ask a question. Oh, Chairman, you would know. So you have money there. So what do you do with it?
The monies have been withdrawn for various reasons, including operational activities where we have short funding.
Operational activities where you have short funding?
When we have short funding, when we do not get the required allocation from the government, we utilize that fund to supplement our recurrent expenditure.
Before you go on, Mr. Small,
certainly,
Mr. Finance Director, Is the Ministry of Education aware of the existence of this fund? And could you tell us what is the balance in that fund as of today's date or last week? And is the ministry, which is a line ministry, responsible for releasing funds to YTEPP on a regular basis, quarterly basis, whatever that is? Is that ministry aware of the existence of this fund? Can you advise us?
The ministry has been...
No, I am not done, but please.
No. You just clear it for me, and then we'll come back to you.
The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Finance have been provided with all financial statements in which the existence and movement of that funds are recorded.
So the Ministry of Finance is aware of the existence, and they have given you authorization to establish that fund. Who gave you authorization to, first of all, establish that fund? And secondly, is the line ministry in this instance, the Ministry of Education, aware of that fund? And do you report every year before releases are made to you that you have it in balance, X amount of dollars in that fund, so that the ministry will know when they are making their case to the Ministry of Finance on behalf of YTEPP for $60 million for fiscal year 2017 in an account at YTEPP, there is X amount of dollars, so we can argue or negotiate downward and not upward. Could you tell us what is the arrangement? What is the relationship on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, the balance of funds in that account is about $4,500.
$4,500?
That's right. Because over the years, funds were withdrawn to supplement operational activities within the organization. All activities within the fund have been reported in our financial statements, which have been reported to the line ministries.
Mr. Small, continue, please.
Just to be clear, Mr. Grant, when did you say this fund was started?
2004.
2004. And you said it would have been funded from your enrollment fees and revenue you generate.
That is correct, sir.
Well, then, that raises so many other questions for me. Because when I go back, in 2009, according to your accounts, the fund had nearly $9 million. So that from the period 2008 to 2014, the total enrollment fees and other income from YTEPP was $7.5 million. So from 2004 to 2009, the fund was able to gather nearly $9 million. These are questions, and we will, Chairman, we will do this in writing, because what I am trying to get at, is it that money from your subvention is going into the fund? That's what I'm trying to get at, because from 2004 to 2009, as at your accounts here, the fund was at $8.94 million. So that if that came from enrollment fees, and I don't see it, respectfully. Based on, and the trend is from 2008 to 2014, your total enrollment fees was $7 million over that entire 7-year period. So that for the fund to have nearly $9 million, the money had to come from somewhere. And forgive me, I have a command of this material. And this material suggests something is going wrong here. A full audit is required into the use of public funds. People have been sitting on public funds and have been operating the Republic of YTEPP, seeking the interests of the Republic of YTEPP, not necessarily seeking the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That is my respectful and humble position, Mr. Chairman. I have one more question before I close, because what I'm looking at here, I have so many questions that I will probably remain unanswered. We will probably submit in writing. I have a question about Mr. Mitra. I know that you have something called advanced something learning. I have so much paper in front of me. You brought down a gentleman, and subsequent to that, and could you tell us what was the, and this is I suppose to Mr. Forgini, because this was around 2013, I believe. Mr. Mitchell was brought in by YTEPP at what cost and to do what?
The cost was around $90,000. Professor Sugata Mitra came for a conference that YTEPP had called The Future of Learning that was held at the Trinidad Hilton in 2013.
Interested, Mr. Chairman. So they're paying for overseas facilitators now on top of the local one. Just interesting. One last question, Chairman. Your youth YTEPP for Future Leaders program, the center, is the center still operational?
No, that center closed 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And is there anything in its stead?
No, we haven't put another Future Leaders program in place.
And again, I'm going to ask this question one last time before I close, Chairman. In terms of the YTEPP Future Leaders program, was any person who was engaged to provide services through that program a relative of yours?
We would have had some persons to teach ballroom dancing, and one of the persons would have been an in-law of mine.
So I just want to go back, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you have to forgive me. Yeah. Because this is where I would respectfully posit to the chairman of the board of YTEPP and to the CEO. I gave opportunity for you to give full disclosure. The committee, I asked very politely, did you have a member of any relative of yours working at YTEPP? Your response was no. I asked, a second question, did a relative of yours provide any services to YTEPP? Your response was again no. I gave you the opportunity to correct the record and place the facts on the public record. At the third time of asking now, you are saying that a relative of yours provided services to a part of YTEPP that is no longer functional. The term is the attorneys use adverse inferences. I would not like to apply adverse inferences the way in which you responded to this. But let me say from me to you, as someone who has an oversight role in this parliament, I am disappointed at that response. You had the opportunity. I gave you multiple opportunities to state the facts of the matter, and you held back information. Because this is what I asked at the beginning, and I gave you at the third time of asking, and there may have been a nice, clean process. But if there was a nice, clean process, you had the opportunity to give full disclosure, and you didn't. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop there.
Mr. Hines, just one second. Mr. Fortuny, Mr. Hines asked a question earlier about the trainees, and they seem not to be getting the better end of this operation called YTEPP. It seems like YTEPP have now been translated, transformed into what can only be described as a kind of arrangement that the management seem to be drawing a lot of maybe advantages or benefits. I ask this against this question I'm about to ask. When trainees graduate, what kind of business opportunities within YTEPP are they offered or can be offered to them? I raise this against the background of the amount of uniforms that are provided by a company whose name I wouldn't call at this time, but you will know that company that received a contract. You know a company by the name of Januras?
Yes.
Right. Is that company contracted, or has YTEPP contracted this company over the years to provide uniform to the staff?
Yes.
Right. Do you have external companies that are recruited to provide sound engineering services?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have, for instance, a company that also is contracted to provide catering services for you?
We have several companies that provide
Do you
catering.
have one that seem to have a get preferential treatment over others?
Can't say so, no.
Can't say so. Do you know of an assistant to the director of the EDSS called Entrepreneurial Development Support Services Department, and that director, assistant to the director of this Entrepreneurial Development Service Support Department, sits on a board called CPSAT Catering that seem to be highly favored by your company, YTEPP. Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not, sir.
You're not aware of this? No. The reason why I'm asking this question is because, who is the person? Mr. KFK, can you help us?
Yes, good afternoon. I am not aware that someone from my department sits on the board of CPSAT Catering. CPSAT Catering has, in fact, received contracts like other persons, other caterers, to provide for YTEPP Limited over the years.
Mr. Fortuny, could you provide us in writing for the following? You do have catering services organizations that supply those services to YTEPP over the years that we are examining, 2008 to 2014. Can you provide us with a list of the companies that provide catering services and the value attached thereto? And could you provide us with, for instance, at the same time, the amount of offerings that these various companies would have been provided with over the years in terms of being able to provide catering services to YTEPP, and as I said, the value attached thereto. So we will have an appreciation of whether this company or that company is having an undue advantage over the others. That's what we are trying to determine. Okay? I think Mr. Hines wanted to make a point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just to get this in perspective for the benefit of the viewers and listeners to this hearing, for 2018, the subvention to YTEPP was in the tune of $55 million. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Good. And of course, in following on what the chairman has just raised, this EDSS division or department of YTEPP is a very critical one. Critical because as a member of parliament, on a daily basis, including this morning, I receive calls and approaches in various ways, resumes, from young people who are wanting to make their way in this competitive world. So YTEPP, and you know, I have taken note, YTEPP, you know, may not be altogether, although there is some fundraise, it does raise some money, at least it's supposed to, and just to support that in 2014, and I'm just as a backdrop to my question, enrollment fees, $466,000 plus, direct cost of operations, well, minus, you know how the accountants do it in the bracket, $113 million. Gross loss of operations, $112.6 million. Operating income, $4 million. Expenses, $13 million deficit, loss in brackets as the accountants do it. Operating loss, $122.6 million. $12 million in net finance charges income, Loss before taxation, 122.6 million. Taxation charge, 10. Loss after taxation, 122.6 million. Now, I went through these figures, that's 2014, the last of the accounts that are in front of us. Because one understands that as a training institution, profit would not be the only motive. It is about developing the citizens of the country and making them employable and not be underemployable, so to speak. And many of these young people come to all of us as representatives and persons in public life asking for our help on a daily basis, including this morning from my own experience. So the EDSS, which has the responsibility for micro-entrepreneurship, teaching people to establish their own businesses in recognition of the fact that this economy, and in fact no economy that I know of in the world, could generate sufficient jobs to meet those coming on an annual basis into the job market. So YTEPP teaches them through this program to establish their own businesses and become, rather than become an employee, to become an employer and to grow these businesses. And I'm only saying that to underscore the importance of Mr. Cave's responsibility in YTEPP as director of the EDSS. And so micro-entrepreneurship, career enhancement, computer literacy, YTEPP future leaders, as was referenced by the chairman and my colleague, Mr. Small, a while ago, OSH training, occupational safety and health, that is, employment bureau, YTEPP alumni center, because you have these youngsters who would have trained and benefited and they come back to help and to direct their colleagues, younger colleagues, all of that. But we are advised that this department is floundering. It has not really developed within recent times any serious strategic plan or vision. You're going to have a chance to respond in a little while. No strategic meeting for the past few years, 10 years it is being reported to us. And by the way, these proceedings are public, and the reason, part of the reason for that is to democratize what we are doing and to allow the public to participate. In fact, they send emails while we are here. So the public is saying, elements of the public, no strategic meeting of that critical department in the last 10 years or so, no input by staff in terms of budgeting, no review or evaluation of the work of that department. The IT corporate training has declined substantially. No training for the IT tutors in order to keep on top of the cutting edge and relevant, given the pace at which technology is evolving in today's competitive and IT-driven world. High attrition rate in the micro entrepreneurship classes. Some people are forced into them or directed into them against their wish and desire and will. A so-called 5 for 5 with NEDCO was a total failure. Minister of Labor might want to pay some attention to that and the reasons why. Not one micro business fair under your watch, Mr. Cave, and the tracer studies and the results of tracer studies have been wholly ignored. Those are some of the elements of feedback that this committee is getting, exacerbating our concern that the beneficiaries or the intended beneficiaries of this program is not getting the best of it, while, as the chairman indicated a while ago, it seems as though the thing is now so skewed that it is the management of the company that is benefiting the most from YTEPP. If that is true, it is a very, very pathetic and sad state of affairs, another national blemish and failure. I hope it is not. Mr. Cave, I would like your reaction to some of these matters here, all under the watch of a very able CEO who imposes and implements things without ministerial, without board, without all kinds of authority. How could this be if correct? Would you like to tell us?
And I'm very glad that we have come to reviewing the work of YTEPP Limited.
Well, yes, and just a second. And the reason why we are only now coming to the work is because, The reason why we are only now coming to the core of YTEPP is because a lot that we have read and seen here about YTEPP is not what YTEPP ought to be.
And I apologize if it came out.
Well, it did.
I do
So I just want on
committee.
behalf of this committee to make it very clear. It is our business to pay attention to all. And you have detained us with some of the wrongs and malpractices that we have found. And we want answers to those too.
Good, and I'm willing to provide.
So now, we have come to the core and the EDS department.
Right, so
Tell us.
So I can start with the entrepreneurial aspect of what we do. Our program is the only program of its kind in all the vocational training sectors. The entrepreneurial side of it was formed in collaboration with the ILO, the International Labour Organization. The manual that we have is one that we developed in collaboration with them. Our tutors and technical supervisors got training, and that's under my watch. We have formed several other partnerships. The computer training that you speak about, we have buses that were financed by USAID, and the tutors, their skills have continuously been upgraded. We provided training to several public sector ministries that we've made hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars from. We have also done, and if you review the documents we sent to you, there are hundreds of small businesses that have been started under the EDSS department. We provided a list of 403 small businesses that are still in existence. Since from 2008, we started based on the numbers that have been coming to us. The EDSS department does not treat with the entire YTEPP body. It treats with those persons who have signed up for entrepreneurship development. And those persons are exposed to 6 months of training based on the manuals that we have developed and based on the systems that we have implemented. And when we do the tracer studies, you would see that the international rate is 6% for persons who actually get into businesses on their own. So, and our rate, based on the documents you have in front of you, is around 13%, so it exceeds the international.
In light of that,
Yes.
you, Mr. Cave, as director of that EDSS unit or department, division of YTEPP, you are reporting to this committee that you feel completely satisfied that it is fulfilling its mandate, doing well, and there's precious little room for improvement. Is that what you're submitting?
There's never precious little room for
What is your submission then?
My submission is that the work of especially the entire organization is solid work.
All right, let me give you a
This organization
statistic.
has continuously provided all...
Let me give you a statistic for our benefit.
Sure.
I have the stipend payments, meaning, tell me, what is the stipend payment?
Stipend is
for
what
the benefit of those?
trainees get
Good.
from the organization when they come to do a training program.
I have some data here on the stipend payments from 2008 to 2017. All right? In 2017 to 2018, in respect of youth training, I see we have 2,542 trainees. Now, of course, in 2008 and 2009, 2008 to 2009, it was 6,549 trainees. 2010, 6,566 trainees. In 2010-11, it almost halved, 3,403 trainees. In 2011-12, 3,004. In 2012-13, 3,009. In 2013-14, 3,033. In 2014-15, 2,741, decline. In 2015-16, well, it jumped to 3,728. Very instructive. Look at the years, 2015-16. In 2016-17, it went down again to 2,164. And in 2017-18, 2,542 trainees. The stipend for the youth training of those 2,542 trainees is just about $6.3 million. And for the retraining, it is $160,000. The average, and this is the interesting figure, in 2010-11, the average stipend per trainee would have been $6,742. In, for example, 2014-15, $6,215.11. In 2015-16, $4,753. And lo and behold, for 2017-2018, the average stipend per trainee for the youth training is a mere $2,490.99. And for the retraining, $2,300 and $2,300 and I think $301.45. So these statistics here tell a story.
They tell a story about stipend payment.
It tells a story about attendance in the youth training program. It tells a story about attendance in the retraining program. And it tells a story about the stipend. And the other information we got here also tells us another story.
Which I think is painting a
that,
picture.
That YTEPP seems to be favoring those who manage it.
And I can say categorically that that is not true. That is not the picture that we have in the organization relative to what's happening in terms of beneficiaries. If you look at the computer training program that we have, there are over 12,000 persons who have benefited from that from 2008 to now. If you look at the other international organizations that we have interacted with and what we have begun in terms of the IOC program, if you look at the CDSL program, which is the only one of its kind that we have right now in Trinidad and Tobago and up the entire Caribbean, which speaks to shipbuilding and shipbuilding repair, that we have several young men who have traveled from Guayaguari, Miaro, all over the place to come to that. If you look at what we have going in Metalex, if we examine the work of YTEPP Limited and the beneficiaries, if you look at the fact that this particular agency is probably one of the only ones that have continuously provided audited, so I wondered about the forensic audit, but audited financial statements. And we have an internal auditor who you commended as one of the best that you have seen. And he has been able to flag two instances of fraud.
Mr. Cave, that is, what you are saying there is what YTEPP ought to be.
But it is the fundamental thing that we do.
And we are seeing evidence that it might be, there's a gap between the ought and the is.
No.
And it is our duty to interrogate those matters, and that's what we are doing. That's what we are doing. Now, in terms of the IT, for an example, yes. I just told you what the public, and that might very well be internal public, because the text that we got, the email I got coming into this program suggested that it sounds intimate.
So is that
just
one
hold on,
email?
Just hold on, Mr. Cave, please. I don't work in YTEPP. I've never had the benefit of YTEPP training, although maybe I should. But I'll tell you this. It sounds like intimate information, and a member of your internal public is saying in respect of IT, the tutors are not being upgraded and trained and skilled, and the program is not where it ought to be. So this is it ought to be an indication to you to pull it together and ensure that that cannot be justifiably said.
And I am saying to you, sir, that at the last meeting, we had information provided where continuously all tutors are upgraded with meetings. I'm responsible for career enhancement.
Mr. Cave,
thank you.
Mr. Cave, we are inching towards 1 o'clock. I want to ask, Mr. Hines has raised a number of important matters that members of the public are asking. We are going to submit those to you, and you can respond in writing, right? Because we want to give everyone a fair chance. So we will submit to you in writing those areas that the members of the public are concerned about. You being the director, you will get it, and you will respond in writing. I want to give Mrs. Baptiste the floor. This will be the final question that we'll be entertaining, and then I'll call on the chairman of YTEPP and the permanent secretary to make some closing remarks. Mrs. Baptiste Primus, please.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. My question focuses on the fund at the UTC. Mr. CEO, you indicated that the present balance in that fund is $4,500.
Yes, the Director of Finance would have indicated that.
All right. So my question is, the withdrawals from that account over the years, for the period of time you were here, did you receive authorization from the board to make those withdrawals?
Yes, ma'am. Deposits to the account and withdrawals from the account are authorized by the board.
Madam Chairman, are you aware of the existence of this fund?
Yes. Yes, I want to say yes. From reports that they have been submitted to the board.
So you are aware of the existence of the fund?
Yes.
Since you have been the chairman, have you authorized any withdrawals from the fund?
No, I have not.
When the fund was brought to your attention, what was the balance in the fund?
I can't see. I can't remember.
Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education. Is the Ministry of Education aware that funds were drawn down from this account to meet recurrent expenditure?
No, we're not aware of that specific transactions on the fund. We are aware of the fund.
Now that you're aware of the fund, what kind of advice would you What kind of advice would you want to give the chairman of the board and the CEO of YTEPP with regards to drawdowns from funds to meet recurrent expenditure?
Well, before we even get to the point of recurrent, the initial authority to set up the fund and how the fund was, well, funded to begin with in the first place, that would be the first jump-off point. After that, we will deal with whether the fund is even required at all.
But we have a practical situation where the CEO has admitted within your hearing that funds were drawn down from this fund to meet recurrent expenditure. What advice would you want to give the chairman of the board and the CEO with regards to drawdowns to meet recurrent expenditure?
I think the ministry has to be informed before we even carry out any transactions of that nature.
So, Madam Chair, you are so advised, and the CEO, that is not acceptable. Funds are released from the ministry for meeting the expenses of YTEPP. Mr. Chairman, there is so much more, but I will ask the CEO one final question. Is any one of your relative, or has any one of your relative hired to conduct training at the YFL facility and was being paid under their maiden name?
Yes.
And who was that person?
The person would have been my spouse.
I have no further question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. May I? Note,
Chairman,
yes.
that the CEO indicated to me earlier on that no relative of his were ever employed to do anything at YTEPP.
Yeah. May I ask the investments division whether your division is aware of the existence of those funds, UTC, what do you call it? The money market fund. Are you aware of such a fund? And if you are aware of such a fund, did the Investments Division, through the Ministry of Finance, authorize the establishment of such a fund? Are you aware? And did you authorize that as a very important agency for monitoring state enterprises in Trinidad and Tobago?
We are aware of the establishment of a fund because it is recorded in the financial statements. As to the authority to establish a fund, I am not aware of the authority to establish the fund.
But as an agency that is responsible, or division or a unit, to monitor and to ensure that these enterprises and so on are carrying out their responsibilities properly, consistent with value for money, in the interest of the taxpayers and corporations whole. When we saw such a fund being established, did we not raise a red flag or seek to have some inquiry made as to who authorized this fund to be established? Because you just indicated that you're aware of such a fund, but you don't know who, how it was established or who authorized it. So wasn't it within your remit to inquire?
I would say yes, but the fund has been in existence for quite a number of years. And if the ministry notices that monies are invested in, let's say, some investments that may not be of a certain standard, then we will bring that to the attention. So we may not have seen a need to inquire further into this investment.
No, the reason why I'm asking this is because we have been told that that money has been drawn down to the point where there's only $4,000 remaining over the years for recurrent expenditure. And the simple point is, if you are coming to the ministry via the Ministry of Education or whichever ministry is responsible for YTEPP at the material point in time, and they are requesting $60 million to run their operations, would not the ministry want to know that there is a fund under the YTEPP that contains $9 million, as an example, and they are asking for 60? Give them 51, because they have 9 put away in a fund that you have authorized or you are aware of. So I'm just asking, whether this was a secret fund, meaning that you had it there, YTEPP, they ask for 70 million, they get 60 million, and they are able to access this fund to do whatever they want with it for whatever they choose to invest that $6 or $9 million for. I'm just asking that because I just find it curious that you could have an agency just accessing a fund and without authorization, and they can do whatever they want. And you are not aware fully, and the Ministry of Education is not aware. So something is fundamentally wrong with that arrangement.
What I would say to that is that YTEPP is provided funding by the Ministry of Finance via the line ministry. They usually request for funding on a quarterly basis or whatever from the line ministry. So the ministry relies on the line ministry, the Ministry of Finance relies on the line ministry to do that due diligence, to ensure that whatever funds you are requesting from the Ministry of Finance to fund the operations of the company. So the ministry relies on that control from the line ministry.
All right, thank you so very much. Madam Chairman, I will give you the last say. And if you can give us some brief closing remarks in a few, maybe a minute, we will appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to reiterate that what I said before, after this hearing, YTEPP can only get better. The processes in YTEPP can only get better. Our performance can only get better. We have had some revelations here that this board, and I give you my word that this board will not only attempt, but will ensure that YTEPP comes out as one of the best organizations, one of the best operations in Trinidad and Tobago. Because there has been some good work in YTEPP. We have testimonies from those who have passed through YTEPP. Yes, unethical practices, you might say, have crept in, or unauthorized practices, let me take back unethical, have crept in, and I can assure you that we will do all in our power. My board will do all in its power to ensure that YTEPP comes out on top and is a virtue of paragon, if I may say so. We have only been...
On behalf of this committee, I, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, express our profound thanks to everyone, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the YTEPP team that have come here for the second time. We want to thank you along with members of the media, the listening public, the viewing public. I want to make it very clear, Madam Chair, our role and responsibility is to help you. But we cannot sit by and see any irregular practices emerge in any state enterprise that receives public money that the Parliament, of which I'm a member, approve every year. We need to get a proper accountability for every cent that is given to every entity, ministry, state enterprise, statutory authority. And we want to get value for money. We want to see efficiency, efficacy, and economy in the expenditure of public funds. And we will not tolerate and will not permit any misuse or abuse of the public purse by anyone in any state enterprise or any ministry that comes before us. We deal with state enterprises, and our responsibility is to improve. So from our report, there will be findings, there will be recommendations, all designed to improve the efficiency, the efficacy, the economy, and the effectiveness of YTEPP as an institution. I cannot agree with you more when you said that YTEPP has done good work for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of young people have benefited from YTEPP, and there's evidence to show that. What has happened is that they have lost their moorings. They have shifted and drifted, and we have to bring them back in line, and that is what we are about. So I want to thank you very much for being here, and we look forward and so on to seeing you when the rest of the financial statements come to us, 15, 16, and 17. When those come, we will re-invite you so that we can look at those accounts. Thank you very much, members of the public. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.